Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Scots and Socks. As usual, I am Scott, and he is Scott, and today we're talking about trust in authority. And before we kick off on this one, I've been a big fan of the Edelman Trust Barometer for a very, very long time. I think the metrics that they provide, or the fact that they, in fact, measure trust or our lack of trust in government, NGOs, corporates, I find this really interesting, and I think it tells us a lot about the fabric of Australians as consumers, as employees, and I've got some hypotheses around that. This year's results, the 2023 Edelman Barometer, Trust Barometer, and let me see if I can post that in the comments, just so people can see the link to that. Who are getting advanced here, Scotty?
That is well technologically advanced.
Isn't it? Look at that. Look at that. There it is. There it is. Look at me go. Wow. Who said old people don't know tech? So one of the great things about this Trust Barometer, it really does give us a good vibe of not only how Australians are feeling about each other and about authority or governing bodies, but it also shows us how we compare to the rest of the world. And I find that some of this is really startling, particularly as it relates to things like employee engagement, which we're particularly poor at on a global scale, and issues like that, which I believe relate to a concentrated marketplace where, let's just say, consumers get better treated around the world than perhaps they do in Australia because of a lack of competition. But I'll tell you a few things that came out at me this year that really, from the report, just to kick this conversation off, that really struck me. And there was one about anyone who disagrees with my opinion is someone I don't want to know anything about. So basically, it says here, very few would help, live near, or work with somebody who disagreed with their point of view. So if someone disagreed with your point of view as an average Australian, according to the report, only 24% of people would help those people if they were in need because they disagreed with their point of view. Only 21% would be prepared to live in the same neighborhood, and only 19% would be prepared to have them as co-workers because they disagree with their point of view. That's extraordinarily polarizing if you think about it. And we think about, and Scott and I have talked about, people doing it hard, people living rough, or sleeping rough rather, and those kinds of things. If you believe, or you have a predisposition to blaming those people for their circumstance, what is the likelihood that you're going to treat them like a human being? If you believe that those situations are the fault of those people, what is the likelihood of you reaching out? And a few other things to touch on. There was another one that really blew me away. So this one, more than half of Australian respondents, so 61%, think the lack of civility and mutual respect today is the worst they have ever seen. 61% of Australians think that. Governments entered the realm, according to Edelman, of distrust. I don't think that's a surprise, but lower levels than 2020. And governments across the board, NGOs, governments, corporates have all had slides in trust. And frankly, I've been looking at this report for, oh God, it feels like 10 years, maybe more. And we have been on a slippery slope of distrust through that entire period. What I want to talk about today is how that impacts us when it comes to empathy. And as trust is a key ingredient, at least a player on the field of empathy, I'm really keen to talk about, as a backdrop, how that affects our ability to relate to other people and to relate to other people who perhaps aren't like us. That's a bloody long intro, but Scotty Carson, you want to chime in on some of that? I'm done with my geeky stat thing.
Oh, look, and I love it. But the thing that's coming up for me is, why is trust so important? That's what's coming up for me, because it is really hard to trust things these days. And with AI entering the market in such a big way, and dominating a lot of the problems that we're getting within our social content because we don't know what's real.
Mhm.
You know, I like to call it the Botox of life, right? We're filling
Indeed.
it up with crap. So in order to have this fake facade that's not real. And in general, our wrinkles are our lifelines. That's our wisdom. That's our beauty.
Mhm.
So with that in
Mhm.
mind, I want to start with why trust is so important. Why do you think trust is so important, Scotty?
Oh, wow. It's the foundation of relating. It's the foundation of relationships. It's the foundation of doing business. It's the foundation of all I mean, having been in the sales realm for years, I was very fortunate to learn early that if you just look after people's interests, selling stuff isn't that hard.
Mm.
Um, if you sell people stuff they don't need or that doesn't work, you're going to have a pretty short career. It's pretty simple. I mean, we all want to feel like we can trust people that we do business with, trust people to pay their bills, trust people to do what they say they're going to do. And I think as we've had less and less of that from people, our expectations have lowered. I think it increases this sense of isolation and dog eat dog, and no one else gives a shit about me. So, um, why should I? And I think that just creates a poison in society. But we see breaches of trust everywhere. Um, the extent of broken relationships in current society is a great one to look at. It's not so great, but it's a point of evidence, right? Um, the extent to which people do business, the amount of and I've done a lot of negotiation courses, and an awful lot of them work on this win-lose proposition, which is it flies in the face of having a long, healthy commercial relationship with somebody. Uh, I think this is what's missing and that we need to rebuild. And part of understanding other people, part of the empathy that we talk about in terms of truly understanding something from somebody else's perspective, which three-quarters of us don't want to do, right, is the beginning point from which we can create trust with another person. So I know here's a great example, Scott. When we've walked up, and you've done this a million times, so I don't want to make it sound like it's me doing it, but when we hit the streets and we start giving away socks to people and thank them for doing their best, um, an awful lot of people from mainstream everyday life are expecting us to sell them something. They're expecting us to want something from them in exchange for that gesture. That in and of itself is a great um, yardstick for the fact that none of us expect anything from anybody, um, which again is the fabric of an inherent lack of trust, right? But what I'm also interested in is having studied a lot of vulnerable communities. It stands to reason that, for me, let me just say this, and I'll say it out loud. In my career, I feel safer economically, as volatile as it can be. I feel safer in self-employment than I do working for the man. I feel like I know that I'll look after myself better than I could ever trust a corporation or a business to look after my interests in exchange for my effort. So, if I'm making decisions like that, I'm choosing to isolate myself from collectives because it's safer. And it's bloody hard running your own business, right? So it's a pretty serious choice. But for me, that comes down to trust.
There's a lot coming up for me at the moment, right? And
Yep.
when we look at trust and authority, and I've been doing a lot of presentations in around men's health and helping men have bigger conversations. I've been trying to identify what's the one key area that if I focus my time on, will give me the biggest opportunity to make an impact in what is the human experience.
Mhm.
For me, I identify that as the relationship between a father and his children. I've identified that because so often we give people the opportunity to, I want to address that in a sec, if that's all right.
Mhm.
We give, that's why, because I don't want to lose train of thought. So when we're engaging as fathers, we're focused on, what we can give the kids as a community. How do we support the kids? What can we give them to get them more? When in reality, they always go back into the family environment. So it doesn't matter what you give them at school, because when they go home in the family environment, they're still in an environment that can be disruptive, right? So,
Mhm.
and I personally think men are doing an amazing job of actually stepping up and creating better environments at home, trying to take ownership. We're really learning how to become better. We can always improve. But the reason why I'm bringing this up in trust and authority, right, is the first relationship as a man that you have or as a child is with your parents, the trust
Mhm.
and authority, right? I
Mhm.
was speaking to a dad yesterday, and it was about beautiful conversation about him and his daughter and myself and my son. And we're talking about how we actually embrace and enjoy the discomfort of having some really tricky conversations these days.
Mhm.
But they only happen because our children trust us enough to talk to us about anything,
Mhm.
and how much we've grown as human beings because we're wanting to jump into those conversations with them.
Mhm. Exactly.
And all that stems from the little seeds of trust that we've built in the 12 years that both of our children have been in existence, consistently building trust to create these amazing relationships. Let's look at the counter of that. I spend a lot of time talking to people who are having a tough time in life, and the majority of them come from a lack of trust in
Mm.
being able to find support, who to listen to. The people
Mhm.
that have been the authority in their lives have crushed them,
Mm.
weren't there for them in those moments, or didn't have an avenue for that.
I
Why
think it's
is
real.
Yeah, sorry, but why is trust so important? Because it's the foundation of us being able to deal with difficult situations.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we should pay some regard to the fact that today, um, not to take anything away from my parents or their parents, in fact, and things that they had to deal with, but we have to talk to our children about elements of distrust a lot more. We have to talk to our children about things that are much more complicated than our parents had to talk to us about. I mean, having a conversation with a 13-year-old about gender identity, for her own self-worth and being. Hey, I don't have an instruction manual on that, and the skipping rope of life, I just don't want the thing to hit me in the back of the head, right? So, I there's other conversations that I've had to have with her, which is, if you're playing Minecraft and you're playing Fortnite, maybe that person you're chatting with is an adult. Things that my parents didn't have to go down those routes. So, and what are we talking to our kids about? Like my folks used to say, don't talk to strangers. And now it's like, hey, don't SMS, don't Snapchat, don't Fortnite with strangers, right? Because there's shit everywhere that you've got to be cautious about. And so, what I can concerned with is, what does that engender in my child about what trust and faith she can put in the world around her, when it's my job to say to her, hey, there's lots and lots and lots of spaces that you can fall into trouble here through no fault of your own. It's the way the world is. So is is it any surprise then that trust is on a massive decline, right? And to your point about parents, and this is a really interesting segue. You're talking about parents and trust with parents. It's so critical, right? You'll never be more helpless and dependent than you are as a young child,
Correct.
right? And that's important. And then when we talk about vulnerable people in communities, right, and their trust and authority, those people are more dependent on authority than anyone else in society, right? As are, as I mentioned before, employees more dependent on companies than people who are self-employed. But that, when I think about vulnerable people, they've had more exposure to authority, more exposure and reasons potentially to formulate a level of distrust in authority. And what does that mean? And why did we want to talk about that today? Because this whole series is about how do we engage with people who need our help and support? How do we engage with people effectively so that they can get the support and help they need from us, right? And so if you're a not-for-profit whose trust has fallen, if you're a government organization whose trust is in the toilet, or a corporation, and you want to reach out to say to people, we're here to help you, an awful lot of the population are calling bullshit. So where does that leave you from an effectiveness perspective? That was an idea, that beep, if you heard that. I usually turn the volume down.
I'm trying to decide, Scotty, whether or not, because I'm pretty bloody raw and open to any opportunity. But you and I had a conversation earlier today, and I want to talk about it. All right.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So we're going to go there, because one of the things that there's so many filters in life, and when we're looking through things through a filter, we don't get to the truth, right? Because we don't get everything coming through. Gorgeous Scotty here posted a photo today, and it was filtered.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually rang him and said, dude, we're having a conversation. I don't like your photo. He goes, why? And I'm like, because it's not you. It's not the real you. It's not who you are. We're trying to be raw and authentic and be empathetic. Empathetic. Mm-hmm. We here's our wounds, here's our scars. You know,
and he's right about that. I mean, one of the things I'm trying to do at the moment is build up accountability amongst my contacts about what I'm doing with my life that's positive for me. And so I took my very, very first selfie in a gym that I've ever put on LinkedIn. And as I looked at the photo, I'm like, shit, that needs a filter. And I've been able to change the Facebook one, but not the LinkedIn one without taking the post down. And Scott's right. I mean, I shouldn't have done that because, I mean, I guess this is closer to what I look like. But the point is that, you know, it was my insecurity that went, gee, I don't take selfies. I never do. And I'm putting one out there on LinkedIn, which is a network that's important to me. And the very first instinct was to go, how do I make myself more acceptable, more amenable?
Yeah. And so you put up a barrier, you put up a wall.
Yeah.
Right. And that's putting up a barrier from who you really are. And I think that's, if we're going to look at trust and authority, I think this is a really important part of that, is accepting people where they're at. You know, like mm-hmm. I'll never forget the day I was sitting in the kitchen and the drug squad came through Frankston. And that's, so the Bayside Community Kitchen opposite the train station. There's a lot of people in a lot of pain in and around Frankston. It's at the end of a train line. There's always going to be misdemeanors, bits and pieces. But they raced through with the sniffer dog and they just hammered everybody. And it created a lot of fear and anxiety in everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to put their hand up and say, hey, listen, I've got problems, when you're having that coming at you?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, exactly. Like I've sat in that kitchen for 12 months and I watched this amazing opportunity, which was connection between different services and just allowing a place to be, to build trust enough so that we can work with people.
Mhm.
The people that you think you could not work with are currently being worked with, but not just a little bit. They're getting all the right medication. They're getting the right housing. They're getting the right nutrients. They're consuming the right things in order for them to be able to grow beyond where they are at the moment.
Mhm. Base plates for progression, right? And they're not able to be provided unless you understand what those building blocks are. And
Correct.
and all we need to understand is that we don't understand,
Yeah.
right? All we need to understand is that, you know, if we haven't had a lived experience of what it's like to come back from, you know, that situation, then we need to lean in with a great deal of curiosity to understand how it is we can be of help. And that is the whole essence of this series, is that Scott and I agree on at least one thing. I mean, I still think I should use filters and potentially makeup, but
I agree with them.
yeah, exactly. I think I'd go, anyway. But if we don't explore with curiosity what's going on for people and why, right? So why are people not seeking help, or why are they not getting? Well, they've been down that path before and it didn't work, or someone's actually held up a barrier to get something, or someone's made it difficult for them to get out of their situation or scenario, or they've been discriminated against. And you hear this all the time in drug and alcohol facilities and hospitals, where people go in and they're treated like shit, right? Because I gather the staff there are like, well, this is on you, idiot. Like, we don't give a shit. We just need to get you out of here so someone with a broken leg can get in that bed. This is your fault. What does that actually do for a lot of people who are substance affected? Well, it stops them from going to hospital when they've got a problem. Right? Why would you? Why would you? If you weren't treated like a human being, why would you go back there? Right? You just as sooner overdose and be on the streets than be in somewhere that's going to make you feel even worse about who you are. Oh, I've set you up there. I put the ball right on the tee there, Scotty Carson.
Look, I so desperately want to talk about something that bugger it. One of my best mates is in hospital right now.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to take his own life.
Mm-hmm. I'm being casual because I know.
Yeah. I love him. And I've had the opportunity to sit with many, many men who haven't wanted to be here.
Mm.
And with great success. He knows that. And I knew he was hurting. But he didn't have the trust to talk to me.
Mm. But is that about you, Scott, or is that about his experience in reaching out for help? Yeah,
it's his experiences in life that have been shut down, and where other people have put their pain into him.
mm-hmm.
Like, I love him. I can't wait to see him.
Mm.
Can't wait to give him a hug. And There's so much distrust in so many areas of life because we're all out to sell something. We're all out to
Absolutely.
make more and do more.
Hmm.
But at what cost?
Yeah, I mean, we have a society of the get and the gotten, right? And I see this in retail. I've seen it where, particularly lower socioeconomic groups that have felt like, the world hasn't really looked after them or has dealt them a tough path. You can see their distrust in people that are selling things or retailers, or it's huge, right? And it makes
Well,
sense.
but does it, right? Like, let's look at this, right? You're looking at lower socio demographics. They can afford shit food,
Correct.
right? We don't look after them. We don't support them to create a better environment in order for them to be able to step up and get through that,
That's right. That's exactly right.
right?
And that's the whole. This is the whole point, guys, of bringing this to the forefront. They're really basic concepts, but there's many a person out there in the social sector, particularly, and I'm really passionate about this, that say we're out there helping these people, and I'm like, well, how are you doing that? Because you don't understand them. And if you don't understand them, you can't show them empathy. And if you can't show them empathy, you can't build trust. And if you can't build trust, they're not going to engage with you. Right. And so we're in a situation where more and more and more Australians are doing it hard. More Australians are doing it hard. And in the backdrop of the get and the gotten, we're going to forget those people. When I say we, I mean, the haves will forget the have-nots far too readily. And what's that going to do for society? What's that going to do for our communities? What's that going to do um, for safety, for people's happiness? Um, we're fast heading down the path of the US, and it's not a goal I think we should aspire to.
I'm trying to choose my words pretty carefully, because
I'm going to put a comment up here while you do it.
the
Thanks, Kerry.
how do we want to live?
Hmm.
How do we want to live as a society? What are we really going to value? Right, and I dance with this. What's important to the human experience? What's important to the growth of humanity? We live in this world of abundance with so many broken people.
Hmm.
So, what is abundance? What is real abundance? And I keep hearing the you can't pour from an empty cup. I keep hearing that you've got to make a lot of money in order to be able to do the things you need to do. Until what point? Until what point are we going to need more money to do more things and more red tape and more? When are we going to focus on building trust in the relationships that are really important to us?
Mm.
Consumerism is not just the things we buy. Consumerism is what we consume.
Mm.
What are we consuming as humans? We're consuming mistrust, and that is a choice.
Hmm.
When you choose to deceive people to purchase your product, that is a choice. And with the knowledge that we as a society are gaining and growing with, good luck getting that past the next generation coming through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Right?
funny you should mention that, right? Because the trust levels of our millennials,
Gone.
it's gone.
Yeah.
The
No,
lowest levels.
there's an amazing human, Therese O'Neill, who talks a lot about millennials. Right? Don't worry about feeding bullshit. Focus
Mhm.
on bringing the truth out, because these kids can gain the information about you quicker than anybody else, and they
Mhm.
will not buy from you. I'm excited about our future. I'm excited about what's coming, because our society has valued, not for the wrong, well, maybe for the wrong reasons, has valued this massive economic growth. At what cost?
Well, that's right, and it's, I don't know whether I can do this or whether you want me to, but there's a great slide on the Edelman piece that shows you just how low the trust is amongst Gen Z. It's just stifling, like, compared to all other generations, right? Um, and here's the thing, we live in a society where people know, right? People know what's going on, all right? And just because of lack of choice doesn't mean they're happy about it. You know, we've definitely seen cost increases in goods and services, but we've seen organizations profiteer from that massively over this last set of 12 months at the cost of people's cost of living, happiness, and often the liquidity of their lives, their houses, mortgage stress is at an all-time high, and we go to the supermarket and we might make jokes about it, but my God, you've got to give a left kidney to go shopping in Australia right now. And it's just,
Why?
well,
Well,
I mean,
why?
or you
Why?
can, or one can hypothesize is, and let's just look at scoreboards rather than opinions. But if you look at record high profits amongst retailers against the backdrop of people struggling with cost of living, why, Scotty? Why is exactly the question, right? But and a thing I find alarming is that a lot of these organizations and businesses think that consumers will forget, that people will forget what they did. You know, one of the startling things about COVID from mine was how few organizations stepped up and did or said anything to give people comfort in a time where their control over life was diminished back to an adolescent state, where other people were in control of what they could do, where they could go, you know, when they could go, etc. All that control was taken away from people, and I did a presentation on that early 2020 about that psychosomatic, or that psychological regression that people were going to have in terms of control over their own life. And the amount of companies that did anything meaningful was like, you can't, like, I could say you count them on one hand, but it wouldn't take a hand. And secondly, what the government did was instill fear, more concern, and more response to keep us in check. And all the reports now in hindsight of COVID have said, well, that measure was over the mark, and this measure was over the mark, and these things that they put in place were actually ineffective when it came to the disease. So actually, you went through living hell for not very good reason, other than the fact that we wanted you to instill fear and make sure you didn't break the rules, because again, time and time again, our trust is breached. But the very point of this is, and there's a great comment here from Lisa, I just want to bring up because I think this is really important. We need to move from the awareness space to the solution space. Well, here's the thing I'd say to that, Lisa. I think there isn't enough awareness. I think you're absolutely right about there being a solution, but there just isn't enough awareness about what trust or distrust is doing to our society and how it's disabling people who need help and disabling us from being helpful to other people. So I agree, Lisa, wholeheartedly, but I still think there's a great amount of people out there with a stunning lack of awareness about the impact their beliefs and their actions are having on people. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I have to say about that.
What are we going to stand for? What are we going to stand for as humans? What are we going to say? Enough. I don't. This is not what I'm here for.
Mhm.
When are we? I think it's coming in a big way, and it's not coming from us. It's coming from the Gen Zs, right? Enough. This,
Mhm.
yeah. Every single business who's been running things in a, I don't like the word dishonest, because I really think that's something that's a very powerful statement. If you're dishonest, if you're deliberately deceiving people in order to profit or in order to gain, being dishonest. I think that's coming our way. I think that's what's burning.
Well,
People are in
we
enough
said,
pain. They're going to start standing up in different ways. And all they need to do is make smarter purchases with their own money in order to do that.
well, I mean, look at the energy sector, which I spent a bit of time in, and I think is possibly the most amusing sector in the country, who has accepted enormous churn rates of customers year on year. So I had a rate change from my electricity provider, and now the government's legislated that they need to let me know what the best available offer for me is. And so I missed some correspondence from them because I don't filter through personal emails very often. And my plan was changed. And it was changed to the shittiest, most expensive plan you could get your hands on. Only in an acknowledgement on a written piece of paper to tell me that I should be on a much better plan. Which my takeaway is, well, I don't think you put me on the shitty plan for my benefit. You defaulted me to the shitty plan for your benefit. And you just created this huge chasm of trust with me that says the next time I get a better price, I'm gone.
The irony is Gen Zs, they'll pay more for honesty.
Sure.
They will actually pay more. They will actually, it's proven, they would rather spend money with people like Patagonia and things like this that just have an impact on society.
Mhm.
And I think that's like Daryl Vine and Courtney. They're doing this amazing thing called
Courtney
the
Smith,
Firefly.
for reference. Yep.
Courtney Smith doing the amazing initiative, the Firefly Initiative, which is, the economy of social good.
Mhm.
We're rewarding people who are actually doing good in society, companies that they're, and the traction they're getting. They're rewarding volunteers, the people who give first.
We should get Courtney on, actually. We both know Courtney. We should get him on one day and have him talk to people about what he's doing, because I think there's so much good that can come out of that project. And there's a number of people out there at the moment. Another one I want to mention is Doing Good Rewards.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Brad, thank you. I know you're a regular listener. But what an amazing platform it is that you've made it so easy for people to contribute to social and societal, needs. So, they're great. We need to get these guys on, because any of these guys that are doing these projects are great examples of what we're talking about in this series. And speaking of talking in this series, we've been doing it for 39 minutes, and I'm just cognizant of the time. So, Scott Carson.
Trust and authority. How important is it? It's the foundation of every great relationship. Great relationship.
Hmm.
They say relationships are key to business. How much trust do you have?
Yep. I think we could probably leave it there for people to ponder. And it won't be the last time we talk about trust. I think the concept or I don't think the concept is inseparable from empathy. And we hope that this conversation has added some oil. Do check out the Trust Barometer. The Edelman Trust Barometer. Sorry, didn't brand drop there. But I don't think it's really informative to sit back in that helicopter and have a look at what people think and what people really think. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. And Scotty, as usual, love hanging out with you on a Wednesday. We may well be changing that soon, ladies and gentlemen. So stay tuned for that. We are considering not only doing this live video, but also we're entertaining LinkedIn audio at the moment to see how that goes, because we want to invite more of you to the conversation. And from my experience recently, it seems like a good way for us to have a broader chat that includes more people. So, yeah, we'll leave it there for now. Scotty, anything else?
I wish I could leave it there after that comment, right? Because I think this is the key to rebuilding trust in a big way. It's jumping into the difficult conversations with no expectation other than curiosity to get a better understanding, with an open mind that could possibly change your views if you're presented with something that, new information you didn't have. That is why the conversation beyond what we're having right now is so important, and that's why we want you to be involved in this. Absolutely. I've only experienced life through my eyes. Scotty's only experienced life through his eyes, right? Knowledge.
These are my real eyes, by the
way. So, knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. So help us apply more knowledge so that we can create a better existence for each of us.
Fabulous, Scotty Carson. Well played. Thanks again, guys, for listening, and we'll catch you next week. Bye for now.